People have requested that I cover the disappearance of Kory Kelly for some time, as it's quite well known as far as missing persons cases go. After spending a long time trying to dig up information on this case, I'm glad I can finally present it to you all now. I think most people familiar with the case will be surprised at some of the details. I know I was. On October 16th of 2006, 38-year-old Kory Kelly traveled with his friend James Neprud and Neprud's yellow lab Sammy to the Red Lake Wilderness in order to go grouse hunting. Early in the morning, the two set out after establishing camp south of the Moose River Road. As they headed down the old CCC trail south of camp, they became separated from each other as they individually searched for grouse. James then decided to head back out to the road in hopes of finding his partner. While walking along the road, he eventually came upon his dog Sammy and Kory, who appeared to be in distress and sweating heavily. Afterwards, Kory seemed very relieved and stated he had lost his way in the woods and had luckily wandered out to the Moose River Road. A passing car then gave the two men a ride back to their camp. Later in the evening around 5:30, James decided he needed more gas for his vehicle and told Kory that he would be heading to nearby Town to purchase the gas and return to the campsite in time for dinner. As James was about to leave in his vehicle, Kory spotted a grouse roughly 200 yards from their campsite and decided he would go after it. James left his yellow lab Sammy with Kory to go with him on his hunt. James would later tell authorities that he last saw Kory walking 200 yards south of camp with his shotgun after telling him he would see him when he got back. James then left the camping area and began heading to Town. After purchasing his gas, James would arrive back to camp about an hour and a half later at 7 p.m. and expected to find Kory already there preparing supper, but Kory had still not returned to camp, and James waited, expecting to see him return before darkness set in. James would fall asleep and wake up around 4 a.m. to find that Kory had still not returned. At this point, he was afraid that Kory had gotten lost, and began searching for him on the trail where he had last seen him. James walked the trail south for 2 miles until he came to a T-junction where the area ahead became more swampy. He decided to head back to camp and change his clothes after becoming soaked from night-long rains. James headed back out and began looking on the old CCC trail where he discovered candy wrappers he believed were Kory's. Still, he was unable to locate his hunting partner. James returned to camp and went out on the road until he ran into 2 hunting parties. James informed them that his partner was missing and in need of help. The 2 hunting parties flagged down a conservation officer while James went back out to continue looking for Kory. While out on the CCC trail, James heard sirens coming in the direction of his camp and went back to meet up with officers who had arrived in the area. It was here that James was interviewed by the Beltrami County Sheriff's Department. James informed them that he and Kory had not done any drugs nor consumed any alcohol, but that Kory was taking prescription pain medication because of damage to his spine. Due to this injury, Kory had been told by specialists not to work. During the interview, James told authorities that he had only known Kory since the summer, and that they had frequently fished together. James stated he trusted Kory and hunted with him because he didn't mess around and do stupid things. He said that he liked Kory because he never would go off alone and get lost like he had that day. The deputy noted during the interview that James referred to Kory as a dumbass on several occasions. James also told deputies that Kory was not a very adept woodsman and said his skills as an outdoorsman were not the best. He said that Kory was a smoker and likely had a fire-starting device with him, either a lighter or matches. James said that Kory was not dressed well for the weather, wearing only a light pullover jacket, thin insulated windbreaker pants, thin gloves, and his hunting boots. James had given Kory a compass earlier in the day after he had become lost, telling him that if he became lost again, to head west as he would come out to a trail of some sort. Kory also had a cell phone, but it was unlikely he could obtain reception in the area. James then provided items from both Kory and his dog Sammy, so the Beltrami Sheriff's Office could begin searching with canines. The search had a hard road ahead because the area is densely forested and swampy, with winter weather coming in fast. Kory Kelly's family arrived along with hundreds of volunteers and multiple agencies. A large staging area was set up where people were bussed in to assist, and many helicopters searched from the sky while ground teams and canines searched from below. On October 25th, James Neppard's dog Sammy was found 2.5 miles north of Moose River Road on the Parkway. The dog was severely emaciated and dehydrated. Authorities initially sent off the dog's stomach contents and fecal matter in order to determine if it had eaten any human remains or clothing fibers, but the sheriff's report claims the specimens were never actually tested. By October 31st, searchers had found Kory's hat, cigarette pack, live shotgun shell, lighter, and gloves, followed by a series of boot prints before finding his sweatshirt in an area where he apparently bedded down. They then found ashes from a small campfire and a lip balm container with 1/3 gram of meth. Then his coveralls and both socks. Yet there was still no sign of a body. Based on the trail of items left behind as well as the footprints, it became clear Kory headed southeast before following a flood ditch east into a densely forested and swampy area. Almost all of the items found followed the straight line of this ditch. The indiscriminate shedding of his clothing indicated to searchers that Kory had likely been experiencing hypothermia and was no longer alive. As the search continued and dragged on into November, bad winter weather eventually forced a halt to all operations with the hope to resume the following spring. By April 27th of 2007, the Beltrami County Sheriffs teamed up with Lake of the Woods County to resume searching for Kory Kelly now that the snow in the area had receded. Kory's body would be spotted by helicopter in a swampy area with tall grass only 2 hours after operations had resumed. The photographs of Kory's body show that he was lying along the side of a flood ditch with his legs in the water. The upper portions of his body were severely decomposed and were partially scattered from animal predation. By the time he perished, Kory was clothed only in his jeans. It was said that the search teams had come within 15 feet of the body during previous searches, but the tall grass prevented the body from being seen. His boots were found nearby in what appeared to be near-perfect condition. Kory's body was located 12 miles into Lake of the Woods County and a little over 1 mile away from the nearest road. Kory's shotgun was never found. The search for Kory was immense, involving 62 agencies, hundreds of volunteers, and 6,500 man-hours. The autopsy on Kory Kelly's body determined there were no signs of trauma. Toxicology results were negative for all drugs tested, including meth and opiates. The details of the autopsy are pretty unremarkable, and for those of you with interest in the condition of the feet, despite some normal decomposition, there were no noticeable defects or injuries. Kory's boots were likely the last thing he removed before he died. Based on all the available evidence, it appears that Kory became lost in the woods and began heading east, despite James telling him that very day he should head west if he got lost. We don't know why Kory made this fateful decision, but it's possible he misheard his friend or simply panicked. When he encountered one of the area's flood ditches, it's possible he thought he could follow it to the road somewhere. Such an assumption wouldn't be wrong, but it would be many miles before he could encounter a road. Initially, Kory only dropped smaller items. It's impossible to know if this was a hypothermic response or an attempt to leave a trail to follow. Kory wouldn't start shedding large pieces of clothing for another 5 miles or so. The small campfire searchers found was likely a futile attempt to warm himself because the area is very wet and swampy with few dry things to burn. It can be difficult to comprehend how the initial searches did not find Kory's body. The items he left behind acted almost like a trail of breadcrumbs that led straight to the location where his body was found. It is estimated that Kory traveled a total of 12 to 14 miles, and likely died within the first 24 hours of being lost. His mother expressed shock that her son traveled so far in such a short span of time. Yet it seems clear that Kory's path was very intentional, following the ditch in hopes of finding safety. It's impossible to know why some people make the decisions they make, especially under stressful conditions. Heading east instead of west was the difference between life and death in this case. Kory's friend did not seem to have much faith in his ability to survive in the wilderness. It is odd that Kory's shotgun, a tool that could have been used to save his life by signaling searchers, was never found. A trail in the area was eventually named after Kory Kelly and heads in the same southeasterly direction that led to his demise. Before we continue, I want to thank NordVPN for sponsoring this video. Today, most people, myself included, spend a lot of time online, connected through our phones or computers, and privacy has consistently been a top concern for many. NordVPN takes care of that for you by creating an encrypted connection between you and the internet, making everything you do online more secure. And this is just one of the benefits of NordVPN. The layout of their entire system is simple and user-friendly, especially for someone like me who isn't very tech-savvy. Upon creating an account, you are presented with a world map where you can pick a location to connect to. This feature is great for those with the Netflix subscription because while I live in the US, I can simply click on a location like the UK and get a range of different content to view, which really boosts the value of subscription services that this trick works for. I can also say from experience that while other VPNs often claim this as a feature, it often doesn't work, whereas NordVPN's service has worked consistently for me from the get-go. NordVPN works on up to 6 different devices per account, whether that be a phone, tablet, or a computer. If you are interested in getting NordVPN, right now you can get 70% off a 2-year plan plus 1 additional month free, which amounts to only $3.56 a month. Just go to nordvpn.com/themissingenigma or click the link in the description. It's risk-free with a 30-day money-back guarantee and a great value considering all NordVPN has to offer. On July 27th of 2016, 20-year-old Jacob Beetler left his home in Pleasant Valley, Nevada at 4:30 a.m. to go hiking in the Ruby Mountains in order to scout deer in an area called Ruby Dome. He told his parents that he would be driving to the Spring Creek campground to park, and then setting out from there. He had planned to return home later that day. Jacob never made it back, however. His father, Joe Beetler, reported him missing on July 28th, telling the Elko County Sheriff's Office that his son had no medical conditions and is capable of spending the night outdoors, but may get confused and lose his sense of direction at times. Joe noted that his son was wearing camouflage clothing and was carrying only a few granola bars and water containers. Jacob's car was soon found by his father parked at the turnaround at the top of Lamoille Canyon, a location nearly 10 miles from the Spring Creek campground where Jacob had initially told his parents he would be hiking. The turnaround acts as a trailhead for a number of different routes. Joe walked up a trail in an attempt to find his son but was unsuccessful. The first organized search for Jacob Beetler began on July 29th, during which the area was flown over using a helicopter but with no results. The search and rescue report notes that Jacob's parents reported him to have mental difficulties. A local officer acquainted with Jacob described him as possibly a high-functioning autistic person. The family said Jacob was undiagnosed but essentially agreed with that assessment. On July 30th, it was learned that a witness spotted Jacob on the Ruby Lakes Trail on July 27th between noon and 1 p.m. in the area of Wines Peak, which is about 4 miles south of the trailhead where Jacob had left his vehicle. Search and rescue efforts were then relocated to Harrison Pass, based on the theory that Jacob was heading south along the trail. On July 31st, it was learned that a retired Nevada Department of Wildlife officer had seen Jacob earlier on the 27th around 7 a.m. near Favre Lake. The officer personally knew Jacob and noticed nothing out of the ordinary. This report was consistent with the previous one that indicated Jacob was heading south on the Ruby Lakes Trail that day. Full-scale search operations continued off and on depending on the weather until August 8th, at which point it became a recovery operation due to it being extremely unlikely that Jacob would be found alive. On August 13th, hunters in the area came across some of Jacob's belongings. On the eastern side of the Ruby Mountains, across from the Dollar Lakes, they found a lavender-colored New Testament Bible next to the cliff face. They then found a gray backpack which they suspected belonged to Jacob. The find got reported to the sheriffs, who sent 2 deputies out to the location. They found the backpack as well as pants, shoes, and a green fleece jacket that were stuffed in the crack of a cliff wall. The socks were in the boots, and the boots were tied together to the pants. The area was searched with a cadaver dog and a drone, but to no avail. Jacob's parents confirmed that all of the items found belonged to their son, but still missing were his t-shirt, cell phone, water bottles, and Jacob himself. Because of the rugged nature of the terrain where the backpack was discovered, Elko County requested the experienced Washoe County Hasty team to come in and do a thorough search of the area. On August 16th, the team arrived and were successful in finding the body of Jacob Beetler. Jacob was discovered in a semi-fetal position, clothed only in his t-shirt and boxer shorts. On closer examination, it was noticed that the boxers had both large and small tears in them that were consistent with sliding down a rock face on his buttocks. Striations on Jacob's thigh and knee also seemed to indicate sliding down the cliff from the point where his clothes were located. Based on all of the available evidence, it appeared that Jacob was heading back to his vehicle when he went off trail at some point. He was only about 1 mile from reaching his car and safety when at the top of a cliff he decided to remove most of his clothing, presumably due to paradoxical undressing, and then place his clothing in the crack of a cliff wall before sliding down the rock face on his rear end until he reached a ledge. He then traversed along the side of the cliff for roughly 400 feet before succumbing to hypothermia in the location where he was found. It is believed that this occurred on or before July 30th. I became interested in Jacob's case when I heard some individuals saying he was found across a mountain range in a location nearly impossible to get to, what some people would call a drop-in case. These statements have been made mostly based on incomplete information. Jacob's body would have been found across a mountain range had he actually begun his hike at the Spring Creek campground where he told his parents he was going. Instead, we know that he drove to the trailhead at the end of Lamoille Canyon. Why he changed his mind, we simply don't know. The location where Jacob was found was indeed difficult to get to, and it seems he was only able to do it by injuring himself while scooting down the rock face on his rear end. With that said, there are some unusual facts about this case, particularly the way that Jacob's clothing was shoved into the crack of a cliffside. While paradoxical undressing can often be used to explain why a person would take off their clothes when experiencing hypothermia, this typically occurs in their last moments, when they are no longer thinking clearly. This usually results in the individual shedding their clothing indiscriminately. In Jacob's case, he took the time to organize his clothing and tie his shoes to his pants and put them in a cliff wall. Joe Beetler made some comments that might explain some of the strange behaviors exhibited by Jacob while he was lost. My son's thinking was a little bit complex to try to predict what he would do in situation A or B on a certain day. He would also comment how Jacob probably violated most of the experts' predictions. It certainly seems that Jacob's father is referring to his son's high-functioning autism as an explanation of what occurred. Jacob's father would go on to comment that his son made multiple missteps by not telling people he had changed his mind on where he would be going, by not packing more food and water to prepare for the trip, and by not taking a map to a place he was less familiar with. Regardless, it is extremely tragic that Jacob Beetler perished so close to the vehicle that could have saved his life. When looking at the cases of both Kory Kelly and Jacob Beetler, I think it's important to remember that we can never assume an individual is going to make the most reasonable or logical decision when they become lost. It's easy to look at a case after the fact and wonder how in the world someone could have done the things they did, or have made the decisions that they did. But it's a different story altogether to be in those situations under stress or with hypothermia bearing down on you. Under these circumstances, even the smallest misstep can lead to death. In Jacob Beetler's case, his father thought his strange behavior was due to his unconventional thinking. Both Kory and Jacob were within a mile or so of a road or car when they died, but that's almost meaningless if you have no idea where you are. There is undoubtedly a lesson to be learned from both cases regarding preparedness and letting others know where you will be going. Until next time, thanks for watching.